Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Hinkle, Learning and Inclusion Manager at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her. And thank you so much for joining us today for Something to Talk About Live. As always, I am eternally grateful and excited to introduce my colleague, my teammate, and my partner in crime, Jean Marie Navetta, to start our conversation.
Hello, Jamie. Thank you so much for the introduction, and everybody, welcome to Something to Talk About Live. We are back for another week to have an interesting discussion, and this week we are having a very, very interesting one, and I think it's a really important one, especially for those of us who wish to be better allies to our trans friends and loved ones. So this week's article, if you are interested in following along or having this conversation with your friends and family, you can go to straightforequality.org/discussion series and download the article and the questions. The article that we're using this week is Transgender Facebook Content is Dominated by Right-Wing Sources, a Study Finds. And it talks about a Media Matter study that came out recently. And this article was on NBC News, written by Tim Fitzsimmons. And for this week's discussion, I definitely have some really, really big help. So I'd like to introduce this week's guests for Something to Talk About. First, Bethany Grace Howe, who is a 2019 graduate of the U of O doctoral program for journalism. So welcome. She has been featured in the New York Times, USA Today. She's pretty popular. And she's also the founder, and really funny, which you're about to find out, the founder of Transfers, which is a trans health data collective that makes sure that good information, that information is being collected, shared, and used to inform healthcare decisions and policy. So welcome, Bethany.
Thanks.
And we are also going to be joined by Laura McGinnis, who is PFLAG National's goddess of media relations, who does such an amazing job for us. And both of them are really, really incredible speakers and talkers about this topic. So welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
So we really want to get into this conversation because it's a really interesting article. So for those of you who are just joining us, one of the interesting things that you find out right in the beginning of the article is that what researchers looked at were about 225 viral posts, and they looked at what happened to these posts. Who posted them? What happened? What did it look like? And what they found is that there were over 66 million shares on those posts, 43 million of which came in from anti-trans sites. So the information that is being shared is not accurate, and it tends to be pretty pervasive, and it can change hearts, minds, and opinions, and this time not in a very good way. So that is what we are talking about here. So let's kick off with that first question, which is, for both of you, did the results of this study surprise you at all? So why or why not? And what did you think was behind some of this? And maybe Bethany, we can start with you.
Did it surprise me? No, not even remotely. And I hate to say that. When I was out doing my PhD work, one of the things that I asked people was how media impacted their sense of self-identity. We talk about microaggressions from people, but you can also have microaggressions from media. And I would have these very open-ended discussions with them about the role of media in their life. And they would volunteer. The 66 people I talked to, 48 of them mentioned social media as being a problem. Half of them, by name, labeled Facebook. I mean, Facebook was the problem, and everything else basically added up to Facebook. So no, it didn't surprise me in the slightest. And I think more critically, it sort of answered a question I'd had, because one of the things people mentioned was that they really tried to self-curate what they saw and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that often surprised them was they could be engaged in a social media interaction in the comments field, and all of a sudden something transphobic would erupt in that comments field, even in a piece that really had nothing to do with transphobic identity. And they just were like, it was just the craziest thing. I'd be having a discussion about one thing and somebody would make some offensive joke. And they were just kind of amazed by that. It's like, what in the world? And what it seems to me is what this study is saying is that Facebook itself is creating a media information field that is toxic and uninformed. And if that's where these people are living as they originate their communications, it's no wonder it's coming out of them, even in unexpected places.
Yeah, and and to your point, the article actually mentions that there's been a study that shows the majority of Americans do get their news from sources like Facebook, which I think makes that phenomenon pretty insidious. So, Laura, where were you on this as you got this information? Because I know this is something you've really followed.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and Bethany is spot on. And a challenge about sites like Facebook are they are promoted by advertising content and also working the algorithm. So those two things get coupled really well together. And when you are well moneyed, like LifeSite News or any of these other conservative, I won't say conservative, but very narrowly focused anti-trans groups. Let's put it that way. They're very well funded. They have an agenda, and they can advertise and hit those algorithms that include and promote different kinds of shares. So it's not just trying to beat the algorithm to get more people to see your stuff on Facebook, but it's also beating the algorithm with money to do it. So one story will get advertising dollars and promotions, those sponsored content. It's sponsored on one hand, and then they also hire folks to push it out. So it doesn't look like it's sponsored, but they have other people who are promoting some of this nasty, ugly content. And part of that comes because I'm outside, because it's Oregon and it's beautiful today. I apologize if things are falling on my head and you're seeing that too. But anyway, what right-wing groups have found is that moral issues, or what they call like moral or values issues, specifically about transgender people and vilifying transgender people, seems to move their base. So the more they can dehumanize human beings who happen to also be transgender, they feel like they're winning. So they're going to keep on pushing this content. And from our perspective, people are people, and love is love, and we love people. There's really like, there's you bring your whole self to the table, and we love your whole self, and that's how that is here at PFLAG, and that's what why we embrace our transgender loved ones.
And I think that what you are both talking about actually speaks to part of the complexity of this issue, that it isn't always obvious where the information is coming from, who is behind the information, and how critically reviewed that information has actually been, which gets us into the second question that we had about this article, which was, if you were going to recommend sources for people that they actually should be looking at, or ways to check this, what would they be? And I just want to read one comment that was in the article. It was from the activist Raquel Willis, who's pretty amazing. And she actually talked about the responsibilities of Facebook. And I'm just going to read this quote. She said that narratives that further our demonization, that further confusion, are still the ones that often carry the most weight in our society. Blood is on the hands of the Mark Zuckerbergs and the people who don't want to hold these platforms to a humane standard. So that's some pretty strong words. And I mean, I think a lot of us who have been in this space, we've seen what can happen. So for both of you, maybe starting with Bethany, and then we'll talk to Laura too. Are there sites that you think people should be looking at? And also, let's get into that conversation a little bit. What is the responsibility of some of these platforms to actually pay attention to what's being shared there?
As to sites they should be looking at, I wish, and I'm not trying to be negative, I wish it was that easy. And the reason I say that is because a number of the people that I spoke to in my study said they had tried to disengage from Facebook. They just were, okay, every time I use it, I go tap dancing in a minefield. Yes. And they stopped. And the vast majority of them, and let me rephrase that, of the 24 people that articulated Facebook, 24 of them, or of the 48, 24 of them articulated Facebook as the major problem. And 6 of them had said they had disengaged with Facebook. 4 or 5 of them, I can't quite remember, had returned to it because very simply it has become such a forum for communication and information exchange that they couldn't disengage. It's a little bit like, you find out that the company that paves the roads and lays down the sidewalk employs a bunch of people that you morally hate. So you put your foot down and say, I'm not going to use the roads and sidewalks anymore. And it's a great moral stand, but you can't get anywhere. Well, pandemic you couldn't. Now I don't think it matters. But you've got to get on that road because it is the only way to get anywhere. And so what a lot of them decided to do was get back on Facebook. But they gave me 2 rules. Number 1, all I do is go to group pages that I'm a member of, and I don't read the timeline, and I don't ever read the comments on anything. And so, they said they've tried to find other sites to use than Facebook, and they found there wasn't one. And so it was less, I'm going to walk away from it, and more, I'm going to really curate how I use it.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that. As we were getting ready for the show, I was thinking about the number of times that I have tried to quit Facebook, and I keep coming back to that very reason. And it's interesting. I just wrote down the 2 rules for that, and I thought that's kind of the way I've been approaching it, because sometimes it is overwhelming. So, Laura, what do you think about this question? Recommendations, and also this idea of how should we behave in that space? Is an answer leaving, or what do you think?
Yeah. So I'm not a big fan of cancel. But I absolutely understand and support anybody who needs to leave a space because it is just too much. It is not healthy psychologically, or, especially trans folks do get, as Bethany was pointing out earlier, trolled just for being you, or something pops up. So if you are feeling victimized somewhere, anywhere, get out. There are allies who can stand up for you. There are some really great media outlets who are elevating voices of trans people, of queer people, of non-binary people, trans people of color. There's Wear Your Voice magazine, wearyourvoicemag.com, maybe. There we go. So there's also 19th News, which actually just launched. And both of those are kind of queer, trans, feminist publications that have diverse set of writers and contributors, and they bring in voices from all over the place. So you can really hear about a lot of really fantastic topics. One of my favorite people in media, period, is Diane Anderson Minchell, and Diane is heading up Pride Media, and she is one of the world's great trans advocates, and thankfully The Advocate is part of her portfolio, as well as Out Magazine, Pause Magazine, and just fantastic outlets that Diane is working to really diversify the staff and make sure that those stories are being told. Them is another fantastic blog site. Check it out. Autostraddle. There are just some really great places that you can go to find voices that you won't necessarily always find in the Washington Post or the New York Times. And then there are other journalists that you can find who are doing really great, fantastic investigative work that sometimes is LGBT focused and sometimes is just general market focused, and they just happen to be also trans or also queer or also all of the above. And folks like Caitlin Burns with Vox is fantastic. There's really some wonderful people, and we're going to look, I'm sure, to the comments to find some other great recommendations as well.
Oh, we're definitely seeing some stuff pop up. So I want to talk about what we do about it, because, one of my things that I love about PFLAG is that we do like talking about how we feel, but we also like talking about what we're going to do next. So I know that there are a lot of people out there, myself included, who are always looking for ways to show up as allies a little bit better. And I think especially now, because we are so, frankly, trapped in our homes and don't have the normal interaction that we used to, online interactions actually tend to be pretty big for us. So again, starting with Bethany, first of all, what responsibilities do you think that allies actually have on social media to, first of all, report this content? Should they be reporting it? And also, how do you think that they should be behaving? Do you think that they should be engaging with people, sometimes standing up, sometimes challenging stuff? What do you think allies should be doing if they actually want to show up as useful, effective allies online? And before you answer, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions for our participants today, make sure you're putting those in the chat. Go.
I think anytime somebody stands up for another person, you have to get to champion that kind of action. But in the more kind of practical realm, I consider, I got a friend of mine. She is a county commissioner here in Oregon, and she transitioned while in office, and so is what you would call a very public figure. Mm-hmm. And so in the course of this pandemic, she has been incredibly active on Facebook, just talking about everything. And a number of people have used it to attack her. And I think what you've seen is two different types of responses from her allies. They recognize that there are some people that are just trolls and they're only there to attack. And I'm not saying you ignore it, but they simply will post something like, "I'm sorry, that's unacceptable." That is not, and they don't debate it. They don't get exhausted themselves trying to put down somebody who has no interest in listening. But I will say that as time has gone on, I've seen less trolling activity on her posts, because it's been very clear that people are sort of, by the way, I see you and I know your boss. I think as far as like reporting things to Facebook, I definitely think that has some value. Again, this friend of mine, she really got attacked, and a bunch of us bombarded Facebook, and they finally took some stuff down. But having said that, I've seen Facebook let a lot of stuff just keep on going because it doesn't violate their terms of service. And I just, Martin Luther King said the arc of justice is long. Well, sometimes I think Facebook's is long enough that it's never going to touch the earth, at least not in the lifetime of anyone I know. And so I encourage people to do that. But I keep it with the asterisk that if it doesn't do any good, don't be surprised. And what I have found is just quietly standing up for my friends. And quite frankly, when friends stand up for me, that friends that are not trans, friends that are not LGBT, friends that I think other people would be surprised are my ally, those are the people that have, quite frankly, and I hate to say this, but they have sort of more moral cachet in this because they don't always speak up. And so I will admit, I do really appreciate it when they do that.
When we talk about allies, we sometimes talk about those powers of the unexpected ally, the one who you didn't see coming at all. And their voice just carries so much weight because of whatever characteristic it is that made people think, oh, not them, but yes, them.
Well, I've got a friend of mine that he spoke up one time and somebody messaged me, "Isn't he from Texas?" "Yes." "No, he's from Dallas, Texas." "Yes." "Wow. Dallas. I would have thought Austin." And I'm like, "No, Dallas." "Wow." There are 10 million, there's 5 million people in the greater metropolitan Dallas area. There's got to be some trans-friendly people, and apparently I know one of them. So,
you found them.
out there in Texas, I know there's a lot more than one of you. I love Dallas, Texas. Love it, love it, love it. Cedar Springs, favorite place.
Laura, what do you think are people's responsibilities as allies on social media? How should people be handling it?
Yeah, I think Bethany had some really great advice, standing up for friends and keeping it simple and respectful. We talk about going high, and it really is about just being the better person. If somebody really cares that much to go to share things that might be false, or to go after somebody's character or personality or something like that, you don't have to go that low with them. You don't have to be down in the dirt with them. You can ignore them. A great tool on Facebook is to delete a comment or to hide a comment. Hiding comments is fantastic because the person doesn't even know that you actually hit it. I totally gave that away. So sorry. Now you know. that when you put a trolley thing on Facebook, then it gets hidden and only you and your friends see it, and you think that you're making waves and you're really not. And for other platforms too, you can delete, and you can delete comments that are untruthful or hurtful or harmful. But always, when you have an opportunity, stand up for somebody. Stand up when you see somebody is unjustly. I don't even know when a just time is to be hit with just negativity. Life is short. Don't let it get to you.
So short and not worth the meanness. I'm actually going to see if Jamie can come back in, because I have been just kind of looking over at the comment section. It looks like we have a lot of comments going on and a lot of questions going on. And I didn't know if Jamie wanted to pop back in and share some of the stuff with us.
Yeah. People have seemed to really have a lot to say today, which is great. That's why we do this. I have a comment up from one of our colleagues that, when it comes to reporting content, people can often feel really unmotivated because it seems like some people are under-policed on social media platforms while others are over-policed, and so it can be really demotivating. Now, we did mention this a couple times, and somebody who joined us was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you would recommend when it comes to reporting these types of things on the platform. If somebody feels threatened, if they feel like they're being trolled, what do you recommend when it comes to reporting sort of officially?
Well, I'm a big believer that when you deal with Facebook, that since their algorithms manipulate the world, you should manipulate their algorithms. And what I mean by that is that if you post up on your wall and say, this person is completely inappropriate and please report them, please pass them around. I won't say I understand how Facebook algorithms work, but I do know that one of the things that's embedded in their algorithms is that if you tell people to share something, if you tell people to pass it around, the algorithm automatically sort of says, yeah, we're not doing that because we want authentic transmission as opposed to artificially stimulated. So again, what this friend of mine out on the coast did was she messaged people. But what she also did was she tried to message people I think she thought Facebook would see as coming from different places. So instead of it being, 15 people out in coastal Oregon that obviously all know this person, I noticed that in the messaging, there was a number of names on there that I've never seen. And so my guess is that she was asking, look, even if you don't ever engage with me politically, even if you and I haven't known each other in 20 years, I do notice you live in Florida now, and I'm sort of making some of this up. But I do think that, if you look at what triggers Facebook, I would assume that there's some disparate matters of geography and people and groups and everything else. And I'll say this, whereas she got almost no traction from doing it, I would like everybody to report. I noticed when she started messaging people individually, asking them to report, that eventually Facebook took it on, whereas before they had not. Now that's one anecdotal piece of evidence, but that seems like something that might be effective.
Kind of like gaming the system. I really sort of love that.
Well, I mean, they're all gaming transgender people and ruining their lives. I'm not going to feel too badly about manipulating Zuckerbergs.
Laura, anything to add to that?
I kind of I like that advice. So I think it's definitely report things that are bad. Report accounts that you think are fake. I find myself often seeing something that I think is really inflammatory, and the first thing that I'm doing is checking it on Snopes, and then also just checking, is this person actually a real person?
Yeah. Because
a lot of accounts right now are fake. So they might look real, but then I'm like, well, do they actually live in Texas? Where does this person live? Do they actually have an account? It looks like they have no friends, so maybe they aren't a real person. So do a little bit of sneaking around yourself too, but report things, and then as Bethany said, engage others on the back end to also report.
Excellent. Jamie, do we have some more comments or questions that we want to share? 'Cause I see a lot.
Yeah, there was another question that came up. Somebody was wondering if you had any sort of more specific talking points for allies that want to stand up against this type of negative or sort of trolling content.
Oh boy, that implies that I think facts still matter. I thought we'd gotten rid of those. No, I think I would. Well, first of all, I'm with Laura. Check and see if this is an actual human, and I check people's Facebook pages to see, even if they are an actual human being, do they give any indication that they're open to listening? Yeah. And sometimes I decide people are, and so I'll engage with that. And, I'll put links to pieces that people can read. And also, I will, I got a Facebook friend that is about as conservative Trump Texas as you can ever get. And I'm never going to change his mind on anything. But what I've become aware of is a lot of people that are in his orbit follow our conversations. And so I post links, and I hate to say this, but I try to find links that come from their side of the tracks, like Wall Street Journal. Every once in a while, Fox News does something on its news side that is actual news. And I will post links that come from the media community that they respect. And I'll just say, look, this is science. These are facts. And if you'd like to know more about that, read this. Now, do they? I don't know. But every once in a while, somebody pops up on that feed and says, hey, I've noticed you having a lot of discussions about fill in the blank with Fred. And I'm a little confused on this. And I was wondering if you could explain that to me better. And when I get those, I'm just like, it's like a light shines down from heaven. And it's like, I found another person in Dallas.
It's like the light bulb going on is the best feeling ever.
Yeah,
and I think you're right. I mean, I think there's always this possibility that you might actually get somebody who's watching the conversation into the discussion. Jamie, do we have time for one more comment or anything to read out?
Well, I'd love if Laura has any insight on this, where to find talking points or where to find, for allies that really want to stand up against this really negative content.
Sure. And PFLAG had started, we started a campaign when all of these bills, again, that were targeting trans kids started coming out, and we're going to keep on pushing it out with the hashtags trans kids and so fierce, and sharing positive, engaging content that uplifts trans folks. You could hashtag trans folks. Is a really good way to combat it. And to Bethany's point, sharing news pieces that come from kind of middle of the road or right or left is good. You can even check it on I think it's mediabias.com, and if it's not .com, it's .net or something. But it's a media bias checking site that gives you an idea of where that outlet sits. And it can be really helpful to share content and believe journalists and believe facts and share things that are actually rooted in real people and not fake accounts, and uplifting pieces that share the vibrancy of our community, that take people's minds out of whatever's happening with between a person and their doctor, or any other kind of personal, private thing that for any other person is personal and private, and moves it into a realm of like, wow, look, somebody like Bethany Grace Howe is a PhD and really knows her stuff. Check that out. And give it, and you don't even have to think about anything else about that person, aside from maybe fabulous hair. So well done, Bethany.
Really, really funny too. I'm watching our clock and I can't believe it, but once again, we have run out of time. This is really making the case for the after hours show that we keep threatening to do. Someday it's happening, people, someday. See, we're inviting Bethany when it happens. Bethany, Laura, thank you so much for being with us this week. I have a feeling we'll probably invite you to come back and talk to us again. Thank you so much for everything. And Jamie, thank you once again for being our host. I actually wish we had more time. This conversation is so good, but we are going to keep having more conversations next week. So we will see you here again next week, Thursday at 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific, same bad time, same bad channel. The same way we sign off every single week, advice from the doctor to run fast, laugh hard, and to be kind. And please, everybody, wear your mask and believe in facts. Please visit us at pflag.org to get more help or to learn more about our work. My name is Jean Marie Navetta, and I'm really excited to see you next week on Something to Talk About.